We are in week 1 in Wickenburg. I think.
We are in week 1. Hello, Wickenburg. Welcome back.
Welcome back. We are here. We're catching up on the end of a series. It's kind of weird timing that we're starting in Wickenburg as the series is winding down. So if you haven't caught the rest of the Platos Cave series, you can catch it on YouTube. You can look back on Facebook. You can catch up on the podcast app. There's just 1,000 ways to get caught back up.
And how many weeks are there?
Boy, a lot, 8 or 9.
Cool.
Yep. So glad to have you back. We're excited to have everybody rolling again here in Wickenburg. We're also excited about what's going on in Powell, Butte. So thank you guys for jumping on. Here we go. We are in week 8 or 9 or 10 or something of the Platos Cave series. We are doing Sermon 2.0. I've got my beautiful wife, Lacey.
Adequate wife.
There is something that is so specific. In sort of trying to bring these concepts to the surface, I knew that I would struggle because if I was going to present what I was going to present today in like traditional sermon form, it's a monologue. I have to present the presentation, I have to ask the questions, and I have to answer them. And there is something very unique about having a conversation because what you bring out in the material source to me is so meaningful. I don't think we would have been doing a service to anybody listening if I would have tried to preach what I'm going to preach right now by myself. Does that make sense? Like that what you bring out in the conversation is uniquely different than what I would bring out if I was trying it on my own.
Okay.
I would also say that it doesn't matter who you're around. Different people bring out different elements of your personality. Jacob
Agreed.
and Lydia, for instance, are here with us this weekend. And I like the version of us when Jacob and Lydia are around. You know, and by comparison, there are people that like it's work to be around. And
They're like, oh no, this is your good version.
Literally, we thought this was your worst. But then there are people that it's work to interact with. And maybe you're not as excited about the version of yourself that they bring out. And that's not being ugly. It's just that this is human relationships. I think this is a universal truth. I happen to feel like I needed your contribution into my life in order to say what I was going to try to say today in a way that made sense.
Cool.
Good? Does that make sense?
Oh my gosh, so much pressure.
Plato's Cave. Brandon Grindle, we went to dinner before I left Oregon, and he said, "Do you remember me asking you about Plato's Cave?" And I was like, after I started preaching, he goes, "No, like a couple months ago." So he and I had talked about it, and for some reason it didn't trigger. Maybe that was what turned me on to the idea. But I've been preaching about Plato's Cave, and he's like, "Yeah, I talked to you literally about that concept of, a new version of reality." So. Sorry.
Thank you, Brandon. Shout out.
Thank you, Brandon. Sorry that I didn't reference you sooner in this. What is important? Is it the love of wisdom versus the love of conquering? That's like, what is the best version of reality? Is it the reality of conquering, money in the bank, power, reputation? Do you remember the story of the criminal that he was about to be sentenced to death? Mm-hmm. And was it the sheriff or something? They were friends. And the sheriff went to visit the criminal and said, "I need you to go out like a coward."
Yeah, it was a story that Timothy Keller talked about, and it was written in one of the New York newspapers. And it was about 2 childhood friends. They grew up together, and I'm going to get the details really wrong, I'm sure. But they grew up, they were inseparable. They did something that was like a misdemeanor, and one got caught. And one didn't, and it changed the course of their life. And one went to jail, and
but the one that went to jail had like a reputation amongst the street people.
He went
as like
to
a
jail
hero
when he was young, and it set in course kind of like the rest of his life as a criminal. And the other went on to be successful, but they stayed friends. And then later on, I think that guy
they were having crime trouble in this city because this guy, a criminal, was such a folk hero.
Yes.
And the kids were basing their decisions based on this guy, the criminal, and they were having a crime spree. And so this guy's sentenced to die, and his friend goes to visit him. And as a friend, I'm going to die. What do you need of me? And the guy that was free said to the criminal, "I need you to die tomorrow like a coward."
Right.
And the guy goes, "What?" He said, "I need you to die like a coward, because if people lose their love for you, they'll let go of their love of crime Because right now they're holding on to crime out of like a loyalty to you. And if you will sacrifice your reputation,
Yeah.
if you will
Die to yourself.
Yeah, if you will sacrifice the love and reputation that you've built for yourself for the greater good, the city and the lives of these kids are going to be better for it. And the front page of the newspaper published an article that
It basically, he came out and he recanted his life of crime, even though he was an absolute hero to
died
the
like
masses.
as an act, he died begging for his life. Even though he didn't mean it, he died begging
And
for his life.
recanting his life decisions.
And it worked. Whatever the case was, that the reputation of his life, he gave it up as a
Right.
sacrifice, died as a
Offering.
thing of shame.
Absolutely.
So that
for
the love of the crime in it.
The city he loved.
Yeah. So when we talk about Plato's Cave, I think sometimes things like reputation, we come to Jesus thinking that instantly our life and our reputation is going to get better. And sometimes what's been so intriguing or fascinating is how often God calls us to a life of the fruits of the Spirit, even at the cost of our own reputation. I hope he doesn't, I won't say his name. I was talking to a friend and he said, he's trying to stay in the middle politically right now.
Yeah.
And he goes, I feel like I'm weak. I'm being weak because I'm not getting involved. And I think what we settled on was it's harder to sacrifice your reputation and be viewed as weak. That is so much stronger than picking a political side. To stay in the middle ground and believe what you believe and be viewed as weak is so much harder than to be viewed as strong and actually just go one side or the other.
To be viewed as a warrior.
Yeah.
And for many reasons, like for a good cause. I mean, that's not something to...
Yeah, that takes so much.
Jesus loved the zealots too.
Yeah.
So
So when you look at the fruits of the Spirit, this is, to me, this is the basis for what this whole series is about, is as we follow Christ, the fruits that begin to emanate, the smell, that I'm at an advantage right now because you smell nice, but this is a podcast, so I'm the only one that gets to benefit from that. But that the smell of what it means to be near someone who has sacrificed their reputation to follow Jesus, even if it means sacrificing their reputation, they begin to emanate the love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness. I'm probably getting the order wrong, but gentleness.
okay.
So we get to gentleness, and I told you this week that I'm preaching about gentleness, and literally, you can deny it if you want. I'm telling you, her reaction was, that was the reaction when I said I had to preach about gentleness. It's not a strength. It's not something I'm naturally very good at. So for me to stand up and talk about,
Well, that's not totally true because I see you with your daughter.
it's getting better. I mean, kids
Yeah.
bring out, again, every person brings out a different side of you. And so having kids, you are going to be a different version of yourself with them.
Right.
It's not that it's not there. It's just not something that's like always at the surface.
Where are we going? So where are we going?
So where are we going with this?
Yeah.
Gentleness is, if we're talking about people that bring out different elements of your personality, I wonder sometimes if the relationships around us are more of a reflection of us than the people around us. For instance, if you were to meet somebody who goes, people are just so dishonest all the time, everyone's dishonest, instantly you think, what's going on in your life? Like, what's up with you? That's like you feel like everybody's treating you dishonest. The world is so unfair. You see what I mean? Like the relationships that follow us in our lives, if the Bible says that these are the fruits of the Spirit, I think we undervalue that so many times we benefit from being this Jesus representation. Not that we get it right all the time, but living a life of gentleness and kindness. And so I'm going to go to Jabez in just a second. I think sometimes we can gauge how effective we are at the things that Jesus is calling us to that go transcend above us at our natural setting. What were you going to say?
What if you don't
Keep going. I'm going to look at this verse.
Look at the verse because I understand that the fruit being a product is that you produce gentleness. What if you don't feel gentle even though you make a gentle move, what appears to be gentle? Because I know some specifically religious people who they're trying to pursue the fruits of the Spirit, which is byproduct. So it's not like you can just like manifest it. It's a byproduct. But what you see is they're almost passive aggressive, as like, I'm gentle. And it's actually kind of the opposite. It's kind of violent in its own way. But then on the flip side, I feel like I can be gentle sometimes. In certain situations, it can appear as gentle, and I'm raging inside. And so what's true gentleness? What is it been accepted as sometimes in the church? So how do you know if you're actually producing the fruit of the Spirit, or if you're just really achieving self-control?
I think I want to touch on something real quick, and I'm glad that it came to this, because I'm not anti-church, and I know that is the one thing that I target the most. I mean, the theme of what God has done in my life has always included challenging the norms of a church. But here's why. It's not because I'm against the church. It's just my life. If I had been raised on the docks in Boston, I would talk about the culture that exists there and the good versus the bad, how it's done right versus how it's done wrong. That's not where I was raised. I was raised in church. I was raised in a church setting. And so it's not, and I know this is true of you too, it's not, when we say the religious, it's not that we're against church. It's that's been my life experience. And I've seen some of the deepest wounds in my own life that have been caused by people who claim religion as their truest north.
You've caused deep wounds in ministry at times when you have followed what you knew to be true about the religion you saw practiced out.
When the rules were more important than the people.
Yeah, which is...
That's not Jesus.
Yeah.
I think there were times early on, even after like we started Shiloh, where gentleness wasn't, we were willing to cause damage for the sake of what was right versus the forbearance towards what was kind. Not the abandonment of justice, because gentleness is not the abandonment of justice.
Right. But so how do you know if you're gentle, if you're passive aggressive, if you're not brave, and that can appear as gentle, and you're like,
weakness and gentleness.
Gentle and actually angry inside. What is true gentleness?
I
gotta know.
We've said it that sometimes when people are dancing the dance, but it's not really their heart, that it feels like watching the wizard from Wizard of Oz. It's like watching the wizard behind the curtain when he thinks he's still safe.
Yeah.
He doesn't know he's being observed or examined, and he's dancing the dance, and you're like, no, I see what is true. And they're like, no, I'm religious. Like, no, you're mean. Like, no, I'm gentle.
I feel like that a lot.
In what way?
I think everyone does, where it's like...
as someone who's just naturally very gentle, I'm struggling to understand what you would mean by that.
But I'm saying, like, in everything, I mean, that's what I'm saying is, like, how do you define true gentleness in a biblical sense?
I think there is I'm going to read about Jabez in a second. I keep saying that, but I think there is a direct correlation to the discipline of kindness and the discipline of gentleness. There is a giant difference. There is a giant difference between somebody who wants to get it right for the benefit and the person who wants to get it right because they genuinely want it for the sake of the heart of Jesus. I think there is a maturity that takes place when somebody goes, I want to stop doing bad because I don't like what I'm getting out of it. Versus someone who says, I want to start doing right because I love Jesus so much that I don't care what the repercussions were. I don't care if I lose my reputation. I don't care if I lose my comfort. I want to know Jesus at a deep level and I think what you're describing is sort of this death, the death that happens, and I don't feel like I mean this. So why don't I?
Well, is gentleness a verb? Is it an action? Or is it a byproduct of kindness and mercy?
You say you don't feel gentle all the time, and I know that.
But so you hear what I'm saying?
I do, but at the same time, I know there are times where I get ready to say something in a conversation that might have some tenseness, and I feel you like.
But that's maybe because I don't like conflict.
It's the desire to not cause damage. Okay,
First Chronicles. Or is it the desire to be comfortable?
Maybe people will remember this. I don't know that you can point to a difference in that. Let me look. First Chronicles 4.
Sorry, guys, this is what Jordan has to put up with on a daily basis.
This is why this has to be. But this is why it has to be sort of wrestled through in a dialogue, Because in your thinking, when you have a conversation in your thinking, it's never a monologue. It's always this. I mean, this represents the ping ponging that takes place as you're trying to sort through, why am I this way? First Chronicles 4, there was a whole book written about this guy. First Chronicles 4, verse 10, Jabez, and there's some debate as to what his lineage was, that he was of the kings or whatever. But it says, well, verse 9 says, Jabez was more honorable than his brothers. His mother named him Jabez, saying, I gave birth to him in pain. So this is a guy who is this honorable person who was born with a name that says of pain. You're a pain. Like that you, the aura, the smell, the fruits of your life are pain. This is what he's grown up with. Every time that they called him in for dinner, his life, this First Chronicles, if you want to look it up, First Chronicles 4, 9, and 10. There's a whole book about this guy. But his identity was pain. And so his words, and it's just this little blip. We don't know that much about Jabez. We get a little glimpse at him real quick. And he says this. He says, Jabez cried out to the God of Israel, oh, that you would bless me and enlarge my territory. Let your hand be with me and keep me from harm so that I will be free from pain. And God granted his request. There's a lot in that verse because it sounds like he's saying, give me more and make me something that's no longer associated with pain. But when it says, and I think this is what you're saying. I think the people watching this would be saying this. Why am I this way? Why do I not feel gentle all the time? Why, when I watch this, do I feel this way? And I talk to this person, I feel this way. What's going on in there? What Jabez is saying when he says, enlarge my territory, you look at the Greek translation, he's saying, expand my boundaries, not my territory. Don't give me more land. He's saying, make me something different than I've been to this point, because my identity is an identity of pain, and I want to be something bigger than that. I want to have boundaries expanded in a way that I don't cause harm anymore. And so what we're talking about with gentleness is I don't feel gentle all the time. I don't demonstrate gentleness all the time, but I do know that I don't want to cause harm. Even as I'm raging in my own life of trying to sort this out, or how's this going to work, or like I feel tormented or this or that or whatever, I don't want to cause harm to people that are in my sphere. I don't want to be somebody who is so wrapped up in my own pain. Hurting people hurt people. But I want gentleness to be something that even as I'm battling through this, I'm asking, like Jabez, that God would, there's nobody this wouldn't apply to. If you're raised on the docks in the East Coast, every person should be able to understand what Jabez is saying is, expand my capacity, and I'm going to need your hand at work in that. Expand my territory, that your hand be on me, so that in the end, I'm not the source of pain to people around me.
So to do that, because you always talk about you land where you look. So to do that, is gentleness a primary color, so to speak? Or is it a byproduct of different, like if we were going to put into practice, like today I'm going to be gentle. Is it that, or is it today I'm going to pursue kindness? Today I'm going to pursue not being reactive, or like what's the actual action as far as to produce this in our life?
Well, I think,
what is the Bible saying?
I think of the guy sitting in church today, like in my mind, as I'm preparing for today, I think of the guy who is sitting in his house watching a screen, or he's sitting in a church, but he's sitting on the back row, and he's looking at the fruit of his life. Like Jabez, he's looking at the fruit of his life, and he's saying, God, please change this picture.
Right.
Just make this something different, because our primary color may be, some people are just naturally more gentle. Some people are naturally less gentle. But I think universally we could all say, I don't want my life to be the source of harm to people around me.
Right.
Like in my life as a dad, when I think of gentleness, I'm like, don't let my life be the source of pain for my kids in my life. I don't want when people think of like my identity, whatever that may be. I don't want them to kind of like wince of like, oh, I had to overcome my relationship with that guy. And I think that I could get so focused on my life. And I think anybody watching this from any place at any point in time should be able to listen to this part right here and listen to what Jabez is saying, which is, God, I don't want to be like I am. I think everybody should be able to look at that and go, but I can't change the picture on my own. The fruits of the Spirit. There's so much hope in the idea of the fruit of the Spirit, which is where it says, abide in me, apart from me, you can do nothing. We'll pop that verse up. There's a hope in that says, instead of, is gentleness a primary color? Well, I don't know. I don't really know. But it almost doesn't matter, because if I'll get real serious about my connection to the heart and the Spirit of God, my life will stop being a source of damage for people around me.
Right.
I won't hurt people around me. Even in my moments of frustration or anger or whatever, at very least, I will diminish the amount of damage that I do. That God can expand me, that he can expand my territories and not my land. He'll expand me with his intervention and allow me to be somebody that doesn't cause pain. Would you say, and it's not going to hurt my feelings, I think it's fair for people to know. Early on, I would say that pain was something that followed me in our marriage.
100%. But I think a lot of that is like what I had kind of mentioned in the beginning is like this probably, I have to be careful. Part of it is the life experiences that you inherit. And the definition of like I said, some people, can pursue gentleness as a mandate,
right, as a rule,
which feels violent to me.
Yeah.
Which I don't know. How do I say that?
I think everybody that's listening to this has something that's led them to a place in their life in the past or some point. So this is not a Christian.
Militant is what I'm saying. Like,
well, this isn't a Christian sermon per se. This is a living life sort of a thing that says, at some point in my life, I can look back on part of my life and go, I caused damage there that could have been avoided.
Right. Everyone can, for sure.
And everybody can also say, someone hurt me
right.
in a way they could have avoided.
Right.
And if I don't want to be a part of that cycle anymore, where I've been hurt and I've caused hurt,
yeah,
gentleness is a fruit that you should look forward to with anticipation that says, at some point, God is going to allow me to step out of that cycle of hurting and pain and damage that I have been so familiar with. Addiction, abuse, habitual things that people get involved in their life that have been the source of pain and that have also been the source of pain. Yeah. That someday in this process, as I keep pointing my attention, flashlight, to the heart and the nature of God, that I won't be that anymore. I won't be someone who I'll always be the person who's been damaged, but I can limit the amount of damage that I pass on. It's almost like I can break a link on a chain and see a different path. And I think that's what Jabez was saying is, allow me to be something with a different identity.
Yeah. What do you think about, because this is, like with the times that we're in.
Keep going.
Are we good on time?
No, you're good.
Oh.
Keep going.
What do you think as far as the times that we're in, gentleness is something that we probably don't see a lot of, and maybe the people that are experiencing what we would identify as signs of gentleness, it's bringing out, I guess, the opposite force on the other spectrum. But so what do you say to people who go, it's also not gentle to allow harm when you see harm? Or like, how do you be gentle and fight wars that need fought is what I'm saying. Wars that you cannot avoid and shouldn't avoid. How do you produce gentleness in situations where you are battling and you are against
what kind of battle?
Pressures. Well,
because
I think
here's why I'm asking. I think sometimes when there is a battle going on in the world somewhere, everybody thinks of themselves as like a junior soldier in that battle.
Yeah.
But in reality, very few people actually experience battle. What they experience is chaos. What they experience is division. What they experience is, hatred and a lot of things that feel like they're in the battle. But in reality, so few people are actually ever caught up in an actual need for combat. So are you asking specifically the soldiers, or are you asking the everyday average person in the world who wakes up in the morning and takes on their flag and runs around the world thinking that they're in the battlefield?
I think it can be both. So I'm saying, okay, on a large scale, like wars that actually need to be fought, people who actually have to be the conduits of change, or like
when is it time to stand up?
Yeah, but then on a different scale, like on a more individual scale, like what about the families who are in tough marriages, the wives who are having to make life-altering decisions that have to get
they're married to people who are not gentle.
Yeah, because gentle can also feel like, what's the word? Steady. It can feel like not changing. It can feel like,
I think gentleness can be structured though. And I think
it can feel structured, but so the ones who are going, okay, I have to make
hard decisions
that will cause upset, that will feel like the opposite of gentleness to my kids, for instance, or to the life change I'm making.
On the marriage one specifically, I think about Jesus and the rich young ruler. It says that the rich young ruler basically divorces Jesus in that moment.
Yeah.
Chooses divorce from that relationship.
Yeah.
Jesus never changes his character. He never sacrifices his gentleness, because you can't be gentle and chase someone down. His gentleness is what
you can't. That's what I'm wondering.
Chase someone down? No. Go find someone? Yes.
So is it like a soft pace? Like at what?
Hold on. I can say this. I can say this though. Every single situation requires Jesus's influence, and I think what we want to do is, what's the formula so that we'll know how to do it? And what I'm finding, or have found, or continue to find, whatever, is that gentleness may look this way today, where hey, we love you, but like your choices in life are leading you towards harm. We're going to have to pull away today. But tomorrow it might be, I see that you're in a tough time. We're going to come take you to dinner even though you didn't ask for it. It's that being led by the Spirit that says today gentleness in this situation is, I'm going to stand up to my boss and say, I have to draw a personal boundary for the sake of my own health. I have to draw a personal boundary that can be presented in a gentle way. Even though it's a rigid, structured decision, there is a smell. Like I said, the fruits of the Spirit could also be like the smell of the Spirit of like, I don't get the sense that you're enjoying the conflict or the combat. I get the sense that what you really want is relational health. But also I've got to put healthy boundaries in my life. Like Jabez, what he says is, expand my life. I try to pray every day that I think of it. I pray for wisdom. I beg God, like make me more wise, so that in those situations, my capacity is wide enough to see it from an angle that I may not have seen it from yesterday, so that I'm not causing unnecessary damage. So that actually, there's a story, my dad used to tell a story. A guy walks into church with a gun, and he points a gun at the preacher, and in the pulpit, he says, I'm going to kill you. And the pastor, in the moment, says, you're not going to shoot me. And he said, how do you know I'm not going to shoot you? This is a documented story. I mean, it's a guy. And he pulls out his wallet, and he shows him a picture, and he says, because you're not going to make orphans out of these children. The guy breaks down crying. He's like, how do you know I was an orphan? And it was like actually this crazy Spirit-led moment. How would it feel to operate at that level of gentleness, where even if you said something stern, you said it in such a way that brought about relational healing in what could have been a catastrophic moment? You know what I mean? Like, if there is a gentleness that can be presented with good boundaries and with good structure and with good bones, I think that takes God's intervention in our lives only. I think that's the only way we get there, is to say, God, there's no way to formalize this to where I don't need you in order to get it right.
Yeah.
I feel like there's more. I feel like you
I don't
got
know, I'm
more.
just struggling with the idea. Like, some of the most violent people I know, violent as far as like what their actions cause, appear gentle. And that's one of the things I'm having a hard time wrestling. And from what I understand, Hitler himself was kind of a gentle.
Do you know something about Hitler? There's a Malcolm Gladwell book that said every time somebody met Hitler in person, he changed their thinking to where like he's a good guy. People that got the most accurate read on Hitler were people who never met him, because they would read his actions. They would read his actions rather than his demeanor. The people who looked at his demeanor were misled. The people who looked at his actions got him more accurate.
So that's what I'm struggling with. That's what I'm struggling with is just this at first glance concept of what gentleness
Demeanor
means
versus
that actually has been used as like a rod at people by the.
maybe is it possible? And I'm asking this as a question mark. Is it possible that that's why it's the fruits of the Spirit of God? Because the best we can get apart from Him is like a
disciplined behavior, like behavior modification, maybe
behavior modification. But like, there's a word I'm trying to think of. I'm drawing blank. What is it when it's fake? It's phony. It's a substitute, but it's I can't think of the word. But I think without God's involvement, we're left with what you're saying, which someone's like, I'm just gentle, but everyone's like, that's not real. That's not accurate. And it doesn't avoid harm. It causes more harm because it's cloaked in the right verbiage.
Well, that's what I'm saying too. And I look at you and I feel like you almost feel like you have to give a disclaimer about your level of gentleness because you are a direct person and you are, sometimes you can borderline on like harsh just by your.
No.
Jacob and Lydia brought him a button to Arizona that said small talk with an X through it. I loved it because I'm like, that's Jordan. But I feel like the people who don't gravitate towards like what the world would at first glance accept as gentle almost have to give disclaimers of like, oh gosh, I know I'm not that way. But then it's like the people who are gentle, and I'm going to throw myself in this category because I feel like I can almost be, if of the two, I can gravitate towards a fake type of passive aggressive gentleness that is just as likely to cause damage because of my humanity. Ha ha, right. Ha. Well, you don't have to like, I'm not going to give you like an inch to take a mile, but I'm just saying, I'm not to let you off the hook and get me on it, but I'm saying, what is the actual root?
See if this makes sense. And I don't know if it does. Early on, I made up my mind that I would willingly sacrifice part of my reputation for the sake of sustainability. We talked about this before Shiloh Ranch was Shiloh Ranch, that if a pastor would almost paint himself a little bit worse than what is real, I would rather fall on that side than paint themselves as a little bit better than what is real. Because then when people discover the truth about you, it's either encouraging or discouraging. Does this make sense? And one of the things that I've tried, and actually you're good at this too, you don't give yourself enough credit. When people say that I'm too direct, I'm confident that I could, the both of us, I'm confident that we could lie and be believable in that lie of, how are you doing? And like play the role of like the traditional concept of gentleness. But I could only do it for so long until I was like, get out of my face, you idiot. And people are like, this whole thing's a hoax. And like, I hear what you're saying. I want the gentleness to be from the core of whatever is real. And sometimes that means that people don't think of my gentleness as being very good.
And it's at least honest, because I feel like my brand of gentleness isn't honest, because at least I can leave a situation, they can be like, that was pleasant. And I could be like, rage.
You're making that sound worse than it is. That's not true, because you genuinely are the one. Like if we have a conversation where we're mad, it's a representation of everybody to some degree, because everybody finds themselves somewhere in this spectrum.
So, okay, I'm so sorry, you guys. I went down the rabbit hole, I feel like. Jacob, come help, take over. But so if we were going to like wrap it up in a way that was understandable and less distracting for people, I'm sorry.
To close.
So as we continue to close, like what is the actual takeaway for people who are like in a time that I would say is the opposite of gentle in society?
I got this. The takeaway for what does it mean to operate in the reality of the love of wisdom versus the love of conquering. We're not trying to conquer gentleness. I did it. I got it. I got my gentleness badge.
Well said.
It's the wisdom to say, how is my life progressing towards more gentleness? And if today you give yourself an F- on your performance, tomorrow you work on it again. And the next day you work on it again. You're not trying to conquer it. Like, I did it. I'm gentle and everyone thinks of me as being gentle. You say, I want to cause less harm. God, expand me in a way, expand my life in a way where I cause less harm. Your hand at work in my life, 1 Chronicles 4, 9, and 10, go look it up. I want you to be active in my life in a way that expands my territory of myself so that I can stop causing the harm that I've caused to this point.
Okay.
It's not the mastery of it. It's the wrestling with it.
Constantly.
Every day.
Every day that you don't
the diligence to wake up and say, what has God got for me
every day
today? Yeah. There you go.